You know what happens to snitches, right? They disappear. The voice belonged to Blair Pierce, 17 years old, flawless highlights catching the afternoon sun at the downtown Millbrook bus stop. Her designer leather jacket probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She leaned close enough that Reese Morgan could smell her vanilla perfume mixed with something sharper underneath. Fear, maybe. Or fury. Reese stood perfectly still, gray hoodie pulled up against the October chill, backpack straps adjusted just so across her shoulders. Her brown eyes tracked the movement of Blair's hand as it reached for the phone Reese held. But she didn't pull away. Around them, the 4:30 p.m. rush painted the sidewalk in long shadows. Commuters hurried past, earbuds in, eyes down, pretending not to notice the confrontation unfolding near the bus schedule board. "I asked you a question." Blair's perfectly manicured fingers closed around Reese's phone screen. Two other girls flanked her like bookends. Brooke Santos, tall and broad-shouldered, blocked the nearest exit with her athletic frame. Rachel Webb stood slightly behind, phone already raised. Recording. Always recording. Reese's grip tightened on her device, but her voice came out measured, almost bored. "And I told you 2 weeks ago, I have nothing to say to you." Something flickered across Blair's face then. Not anger exactly, more like recognition that this wasn't going according to script. Usually when Blair Pierce showed up with her crew, people folded. Deleted whatever she wanted deleted. Apologized for existing. Reese Morgan, scholarship student from the wrong side of Millbrook, should have been the easiest mark yet. Instead, Reese's free hand drifted to her backpack strap, fingers brushing against something small and round clipped there. A body camera, cylindrical and compact, the kind joggers wore for safety. Blair had noticed it before, dismissed it as some cheap accessory. Now she watched Reese's subtle adjustment with narrowed eyes. "That little toy isn't going to save you." Blair yanked harder on the phone. Reese let it go. The device clattered onto the concrete between them, screen down. Reese didn't bend to retrieve it. Her gaze swept the bus stop instead, cataloging details with practiced efficiencies. 3 security cameras mounted on light poles, their lenses covering overlapping fields of view. The bank across the street with its external ATM camera pointed directly at this intersection. The coffee shop window where a barista paused mid-wipe to stare. Witnesses everywhere, if you knew how to look. "You really should have thought this through," Reese said quietly. Blair's laugh came out sharp and brittle. "Everything changes when I press send." She pulled out her own phone, finger hovering over a screen Reese couldn't see. "Your address. Your mom's work schedule. Every route you take home. My 52,000 followers are very creative when they're motivated. For you, not me." The words hung in the autumn air between them. Blair's smile faltered. Behind her, Rachel shifted weight from foot to foot, uncomfortable. Even Brooke looked uncertain, glancing back toward the parking lot where they'd left Blair's car. The words hung in the autumn air between them. Blair's smile faltered. Behind her, Rachel shifted weight from foot to foot, uncomfortable. Even Brooke looked uncertain, glancing back toward the parking lot where they'd left Blair's car. If you want to see how the powerless become powerful, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happens next will rewrite everything you think you know about justice. The confrontation at the bus stop wasn't random. Nothing about Reese Morgan was random, though most people at Ashford Prep Academy had made the mistake of assuming otherwise. She'd transferred in mid-September, a scholarship kid who kept her head down and her mouth shut. Perfect prey for someone like Blair Pierce, whose family name decorated the Humanities Building and whose Instagram stories set trends 3 states over. But 2 weeks ago, Reese had been in the wrong place at the right time. The parking lot behind Ashford Prep had been empty that Tuesday evening, except for Reese's aging Toyota, parked under a broken streetlight while she waited for her mother's shift to end. Detective Sarah Morgan worked late often, and Reese had learned to make productive use of empty hours. Homework spread across the passenger seat, earbuds playing classical music to drown out the distant traffic noise. The crash of breaking glass shattered her concentration. Through the windshield, Reese watched Blair Pierce take a tire iron to a cherry red Mercedes 2 rows over. The violence was methodical, almost choreographed. Driver's side window first, then the passenger side. Each strike precise enough to shatter without triggering the alarm. Blair's face was illuminated by her phone's flashlight propped against the Mercedes's hood, recording the whole thing. Reese's hand moved to her dash cam before conscious thought caught up. The device her mother had insisted on installing 6 months ago, after a hit and run in their neighborhood went unsolved, always recording when the engine was on, storing footage on a cloud backup the instant it detected motion. The entire vandalism took 90 seconds. Blair finished with a spray-painted message across the hood, the words too crude to be anything but personal. Then she was gone, red taillights disappearing around the corner, leaving only broken glass sparkling under the streetlight Reese's car had avoided. Reese sat frozen for a full minute before pulling out her phone. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory from a dozen dinner table conversations about evidence preservation. Document everything. Time, date, location. Witnesses, if possible. Let the system work. She'd sent the dashcam footage to her personal cloud storage, then sat with her finger hovering over the phone's dial screen. Calling the police meant reports, questions, potential retaliation. But the Mercedes belonged to Emma Zhao, another junior at Ashford, whose only crime was beating Blair for prom committee chair last spring. Leaving Emma to deal with the fallout alone felt like complicity. So Reese had made the call. Anonymous tip to campus security, footage sent from a burner email account. She'd thought that would be the end of it. She'd been wrong. Blair had connections everywhere at Ashford Prep. Within 48 hours, security footage from the parking lot had mysteriously corrupted. The administration launched a half-hearted investigation that went nowhere. And somehow, through channels Reese still didn't fully understand, word had gotten back to Blair that someone had witnessed the vandalism. Someone with evidence. Rachel Webb, Blair's social media manager and digital bloodhound, had spent a week narrowing down possibilities. Process of elimination, really. Only 3 cars had been in the lot that night according to the security gate log. Emma's Mercedes, now destroyed. Blair's Range Rover, obviously exempt. And a 15-year-old Toyota, registered to Sarah Morgan. The first message had arrived in Reese's Instagram DMs on a Thursday morning. Just a screenshot of her mother's car with the license plate visible, followed by a single word, watching. That's when Reese had started documenting everything. The body camera came first. Her mother had a spare from an old jogging habit gathering dust in the garage. Reese clipped it to her backpack strap, positioned at chest height for optimal recording angle. When classmates asked about it, she shrugged and called it a safety measure. The doxing threats had started by then anyway. Easy enough to justify. The harassment escalated in layers, each more invasive than the last. Blair's first move was social, turning Reese into a ghost at Ashford Prep. Lunch tables emptied when she approached. Group project partners requested reassignments. Even teachers seemed to avoid calling on her, as if her social leprosy might spread through eye contact. Then came the digital assault. Rachel created the fake account on a Monday morning. Username: Reese's Secrets. The profile picture was a blurred photo of Reese from behind, ominous and anonymous. The bio simply read, "She's been watching. Now we watch back." The first post was a deep-faked video showing Reese supposedly shoplifting from the drugstore downtown. Professional quality, seamlessly edited, utterly false. Within 2 hours, it had 500 views and climbing. Students whispered in hallways. Teachers gave her suspicious looks. The principal called her into his office for a conversation about integrity that made her skin crawl with injustice. Reese sat in Principal Vance's oak-paneled office, the stuffed bookshelves and framed diplomas closing in around her, and recited her defense with mechanical calm. "That video is fabricated. I can provide receipts for every purchase I made that day. I can show you the route I walked, time-stamped with location data. I can prove this is harassment." Principal Vance had folded his hands across his desk, his expression caught between sympathy and exhaustion. Ms. Morgan, I understand this is difficult. Teenagers today face pressures my generation never imagined. But making accusations about your classmates won't improve your situation. Perhaps if you focused more on fitting in, rather than standing out. Fitting in, Reese had repeated the words flatly. You mean stay quiet while someone destroys my reputation with lies? I mean choose your battles wisely. His tone sharpened. The Pierce family has been generous to this institution. I'm not suggesting you've done anything wrong, but I am suggesting that sometimes the mature choice is to let things go. Reese had walked out of that office understanding exactly where she stood. The system wasn't going to protect her. Adults would look the other way as long as it was convenient. If she wanted justice, she'd have to build the case herself. So she started keeping the log. Every incident documented with the precision her mother brought to police reports. Date, time, location, witnesses present, screenshots of every threatening message backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts, photos of her vandalized locker, the spray-painted word, rat, still visible in her phone's gallery, audio recordings of Blair's confrontations, captured on the body camera that suddenly seemed less like paranoia and more like survival equipment. By the end of week 2, Reese had 47 documented incidents. She compiled them into a single file, formatted according to Title IX complaint standards she'd researched at 2 in the morning. The email she sent to Ms. Ortiz, Ashford's Title IX coordinator, was a masterpiece of legal precision. Subject line, ongoing harassment documentation. Request time-stamped acknowledgement. The body of the email laid out patterns, escalation, failures of institutional response. She CC'd Principal Vance, the school counselor, and the district superintendent. At the bottom, a single line in bold. This constitutes formal notice under Title IX of the Education Amendments Act of 1972. Institutional liability attaches upon receipt. Ms. Ortiz had responded within an hour. A brief acknowledgement, carefully neutral, but Reese could read between the lines. The school was now legally obligated to investigate. The clock had started ticking on institutional liability. Whatever happened next, there would be a paper trail. 3 days later, Blair cornered Reese in the library. The school library at Ashford Prep occupied the entire 3rd floor of the Humanities building, all soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. Reese had claimed a study carrel in the back corner, surrounded by dusty reference volumes nobody touched anymore. It was quiet here, safe, until it wasn't. Blair materialized between the stacks. Her entrance timed perfectly to coincide with the librarian's lunch break. Rachel and Brooke followed, forming a loose semicircle that boxed Reese into the corner. No cameras back here, no witnesses, just rows of forgotten books and the distant hum of the heating system. You sent a complaint. Blair's voice was soft, almost conversational. To Title IX. About me. Reese kept her eyes on her calculus textbook, pen moving steadily across the page. I documented harassment, multiple incidents, all verifiable. You think you're clever. Blair leaned against the carrel, casual menace in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost 4 figures. Throwing around legal terms like you know what they mean. But here's the thing about the system, Reese. It protects people like me, not people like you. People like me. Reese set down her pen, finally meeting Blair's eyes. You mean people who witnessed you committing vandalism and had the audacity not to look away. I mean people who don't understand their place. Blair's smile was all edges. You could have deleted that footage, moved on with your sad little scholarship life. Instead, you chose to make this personal. Reese closed her textbook with deliberate calm. Her hand moved to her backpack, fingers brushing the body camera clipped to the strap. The motion was subtle enough to be unconscious, but Blair's eyes tracked it anyway. That's textbook criminal intimidation under State Code 18-9-111, Reese said quietly. attempting to coerce someone into withholding evidence through threats of harm. Class 2 misdemeanor, potential felony enhancement if the underlying crime is serious enough. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Rachel and Brooke exchanged glances. Blair's smile froze, then cracked into something uglier. "You memorize statute numbers." Her laugh was hollow. "That's actually sad. My mother's job involves a lot of dinner table conversation." Reese stood, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. The body camera now visible at chest height, its lens catching light. "Accidents happen to snitches, right? That's what you said? I just wanted you to know exactly what statute you're violating when they happen." She'd walked away then, heart hammering, legs steady through sheer force of will. Behind her, Blair's voice carried through the stacks. "This isn't over." Reese had known it wasn't. The escalation pattern was clear now. Blair was desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. All Reese had to do was keep documenting, keep surviving, and wait for the inevitable moment when Blair's need for control overrode her self-preservation instinct. That moment came 5 days later, in the form of a text message at 11:30 p.m. on a Friday night. "Tomorrow, I'm posting your mom's work schedule and your address. Let's see how safe you feel when my followers know where you sleep." Reese had stared at the message for a long time, her bedroom dark, except for the phone's glow. This crossed a line. This was beyond social harassment into genuine threat territory. Her mother worked nights sometimes, leaving Reese alone in their apartment. Publishing that information to 50,000 strangers wasn't just cruel. It was dangerous. She'd taken a screenshot, added it to the log. Then she'd done something that felt either brilliant or reckless, depending on how you looked at it. She'd replied, "Do it. I've already filed a police report for cyberstalking. Publication of personal information with intent to cause distress or harm. It's all in the file." It was a bluff. She hadn't filed a formal police report yet, just compiled the evidence. But Blair didn't know that. All Blair knew was that Reese kept mentioning laws and procedures with the confidence of someone who understood exactly how the system worked. The gamble paid off. Blair didn't post the address, but she also didn't back down. Instead, she decided to handle the problem the old-fashioned way. Publicly, physically. A demonstration of power that would remind everyone at Ashford Prep exactly who was in charge, which brought Reese full circle to this moment. 4:30 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, downtown Millbrook bus stop. 3 against 1, witnesses everywhere if you knew how to look. Blair's hand shot out, shoving Reese's shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. The backpack slipped and Reese caught it before it hit the ground, protecting the equipment inside. Around them, commuters were starting to notice. Phones came out, but nobody intervened. The bystander effect in real time. "You think you're smart," Blair hissed, stepping closer. "You think your little complaints and your cameras make you untouchable. But I'm done playing by rules." Brooke moved then, circling behind Reese. Strong hands gripped Reese's arms, pinning them to her sides. The hold was firm enough to restrict movement, but not tight enough to leave bruises. These girls had done this before. They knew how to hurt without leaving evidence. Or so they thought. Reese didn't struggle. Fighting back would only give them justification. Instead, she went still. Every muscle relaxed except for her core, maintaining balance. Her eyes tracked the 3 security cameras, calculating angles. The body camera on her chest was still recording. The college students at the coffee shop had their phones out now, filming. Park, the elderly man on the bench with the newspaper, had set it down and was watching intently. Everything was being documented, exactly as planned. "Last chance," Blair said, pulling out her phone. "Delete the dash cam footage, all copies. Swear you won't testify if the school asks. Admit you made everything up." Reese met her gaze. "No." The word hung in the air between them. Simple, final, unbreakable. Blair's face twisted with rage. She grabbed Reese's hair, yanking her head down. Reese's vision tilted, glimpsing asphalt rushing up. Then came the moment that would change everything. Blair's knee drove upward with the force of genuine fury behind it. The impact caught Reese square in the face, a burst of pain that whited out thought. She heard the crack more than felt it at first, the sound of cartilage giving way. Then sensation crashed back in, bright and overwhelming. Blood exploded from her nose, hot and immediate, soaking through her shirt in spreading crimson. Brooke's hands released her, and Reese dropped to the concrete. Her head bounced once against the pavement, vision swimming. Around her, voices erupted in shock and horror, but they seemed to come from very far away. Reese lay still, tasting copper. Her broken phone was somewhere to her left, screen shattered. The backpack had fallen from her shoulder, body camera torn free by Brooke's panicked retreat. She watched through blurring eyes as Blair picked up the camera, held it high like a trophy. "No evidence, no case," Blair said, breathless and triumphant. She raised her foot, preparing to stomp the device into pieces. What would you do if someone just destroyed your only proof? Drop a comment below because what Reese does next will shock you. Reese's lips moved, forming words that came out wet and slurred. "Check your watch." Blair froze, foot hovering. "What?" "Your watch." Reese coughed, more blood spattering the concrete. "Check it." Blair glanced down automatically at the Cartier on her wrist. Rose gold, distinctive, expensive. A gift from her father for her 17th birthday, worn every single day. The kind of watch you could identify in a photograph even from a distance. Reese's smile was horrible. All blood and broken teeth. Timestamp. "Every camera here just recorded you assaulting me. Date, time, location. That watch is in every frame." Understanding dawned across Blair's face like sunrise in reverse. Her eyes went to the security cameras, then to the phone still held by horrified commuters, then to the bank's ATM camera pointed directly at them. Her designer watch, the one thing she never took off, had just marked her presence in multiple recordings with the precision of a fingerprint. "You," Blair started to say, but distant sirens cut her off. Mr. Park had called 911 the moment Blair grabbed Reese's hair. He'd seen enough street violence in his 70 years to recognize when someone was about to get hurt, and he dialed emergency services with steady hands while everyone else fumbled with their phone cameras. Blair dropped the body camera like it burned her. This was self-defense. She attacked me first. But Reese was still on the ground, bloodied and defensive. Blair stood over her, unmarked except for flushed cheeks and quickened breathing. The optics were damning. "We need to go," Rachel said, backing away. Her phone was still up, still recording, her face pale with shock. "Blair, we need to leave right now." Brooke had already made it to the parking lot, running despite the ankle she'd twisted in her haste to release Reese. Rachel followed, stumbling over her own feet. Blair stood frozen for one more second, looking down at Reese like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Then she ran too, designer jacket flapping, expensive sneakers slapping against concrete. By the time the police cruiser pulled up, all three girls had vanished into the maze of downtown streets. Officer Rivera stepped out of her patrol car, took one look at Reese's broken face, and immediately called for an ambulance. She crouched beside Reese, her hand gentle on her shoulder. "Don't move. Paramedics are 2 minutes out. Can you tell me your name?" "Reese Morgan?" The words came out mushy through split lips and swelling. "My mother is Detective Sarah Morgan, badge number 4721. I want to press charges." Officer Rivera's eyes widened fractionally. Every cop in Millbrook knew Detective Morgan, 20-year veteran, decorated, tough as nails. And someone had just assaulted her daughter in broad daylight. "Who did this?" Rivera asked, pulling out her notebook. Reese's hand moved to her backpack, fingers closing around something inside. She pulled out a printed document, pages protected in a plastic folder. The harassment log. 47 incidents, all documented, all time-stamped. The entire case already compiled and ready for prosecution. "Blair Pierce," Reese said clearly, "and I have evidence." The ambulance arrived, its siren joining the chaos of downtown traffic. Paramedics loaded Reese onto a stretcher, their hands efficient and gentle. Officer Rivera walked alongside, still taking notes. Around them, witnesses clustered, giving statements, offering their phone footage as evidence. Park approached with the body camera Blair had dropped. "She tried to destroy this," he said, handing it to Officer Rivera. "Might want to preserve it." The officer bagged it carefully, evidence tag already prepared. Behind her, more patrol cars arrived. Someone had called this in as an assault in progress, and Millbrook PD was responding with the kind of attention they gave attacks on officers' families. As the ambulance doors closed, Reese caught one last glimpse of the bus stop. The blood on the concrete, the scattered phones of witnesses, the security cameras that had captured everything. The trap had worked perfectly. Blair Pierce had spent 2 weeks trying to silence Reese through intimidation and harassment. She'd escalated at every opportunity, pushing harder each time Reese refused to back down. And now, in front of dozens of witnesses and multiple cameras, she'd committed felony assault on the daughter of a decorated detective. The powerless had just become very, very powerful. And part 2 would show exactly what happened when the legal system stopped being a shield and became a weapon. The emergency room at Millbrook General smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in harsh white that made the blood on Reese's shirt look almost black. She sat on a gurney in curtained Bay 7, paramedics having stabilized her nose with gauze packing that made breathing through her mouth necessary and painful. Officer Rivera stood nearby, still taking notes. Around them, the organized chaos of a Wednesday evening shift played out. Nurses called orders across the room. Monitors beeped rhythmically. Somewhere down the hall, a child cried. Detective Sarah Morgan arrived like a force of nature. She pushed through the curtain, still in her work clothes, badge clipped to her belt, and face carved from stone. For 3 seconds, she just stared at her daughter, taking in the blood and swelling and the awful angle of Reese's nose. Then she crossed the space between them and pulled Reese into a hug, careful enough not to jar injured tissue. "I'm okay," Reese said into her mother's shoulder, the words muffled by gauze and emotion. "You're not." Sarah pulled back, hands gentle on Reese's face, examining the damage with a cop's practiced eye. "But you will be." Officer Rivera cleared her throat. "Detective Morgan, your daughter has been very cooperative. She's provided a comprehensive statement and multiple pieces of evidence." Sarah turned, and Rivera actually took half a step back. Detective Morgan's reputation in Millbrook PD was legendary. 2 decades of putting away everyone from petty thieves to organized crime figures, with a conviction rate that made prosecutors love her and defense attorneys dread her. And someone had just attacked her child. "Walk me through it," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. Rivera did. The assault at the bus stop, the multiple witnesses, the surveillance footage from 3 city cameras plus the bank's ATM, the body camera that had survived Blair's attempt to destroy it, the printed harassment log Reese had been carrying. Most importantly, the identities of all 3 attackers and their current location status, which was unknown. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression never changing. When Rivera finished, she simply nodded. "I want copies of everything. All footage, all statements, the works. And I want an APB out for Blair Pierce, Rachel Webb, and Brooke Santos. Assault and battery at minimum. Potentially conspiracy if the harassment pattern holds up." "Already done," Rivera said. "Captain authorized it the moment he heard your daughter was involved." A doctor arrived then, young and efficient. She examined Reese's nose with gentle fingers, ordered x-rays, explained the reset procedure with clinical detachment. The cartilage was broken cleanly, painful but straightforward to fix. No permanent damage if treated properly. While they waited for the x-ray tech, Sarah sat beside Reese's gurney, holding her hand. The gesture was so unlike her mother's usual stoic professionalism that Reese felt tears prick her eyes for the first time since the attack. "You knew this was coming," Sarah said quietly. It wasn't a question. Reese nodded. "I had to let it happen. They needed to make the first physical move. Self-defense doesn't work as a legal strategy if you're the aggressor. So you let her knee you in the face." Sarah's voice was absolutely flat. I positioned myself at a bus stop with maximum surveillance coverage, peak witness traffic, and called you an hour before to let you know where I'd be. Just in case. Reese met her mother's eyes. I didn't let her do anything. I just didn't stop her from making the biggest mistake of her life. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed Reese's hand. You're either brilliant or reckless. Can't I be both? That's what scares me. The x-rays came back. The doctor reset Reese's nose with quick, practiced efficiency that hurt worse than the original injury. Local anesthetic helped, but not enough. Reese gripped the gurney rails and breathed through her mouth and thought about Blair's face when she realized what she'd done. The memory made the pain almost worth it. By the time they left the hospital, it was past 7 p.m. The October evening had turned cold, street lights flickering on across downtown Millbrook. Sarah drove in silence, but Reese could see the tension in her mother's shoulders, the white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel. Mom, Reese said carefully, you can't be the one to arrest her. I know. The defense would claim bias. They'd say you manipulated evidence because it was personal. I know. So you have to let Rivera handle it. Let the system work. Sarah pulled into their apartment complex, parked, and turned off the engine. In the sudden silence, she finally looked at Reese. You sound like me. When did that happen? 17 years of dinner table conversations about procedure and evidence chains. Reese tried to smile, but the swelling made it look grotesque. You taught me how to win this fight. Now you have to trust that I learned. Inside their apartment, Sarah made tea while Reese changed into clean clothes. The blood-stained hoodie went into a plastic evidence bag. Chain of custody mattered, even for victims' clothing. Reese sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the warm mug, and watched her mother pace. The call came at 8:15 p.m. Officer Rivera's voice crackled through Sarah's phone on speaker. We've got all three in custody. Blair Pierce was home when units arrived. Parents are lawyers, refused to let her speak without representation. The other two we picked up separately. Both are talking. Sarah's expression sharpened. Talking about what? Everything. Rachel Webb is giving us a full statement about the harassment campaign. Says she created the fake social media accounts under Blair's direction. She's got screenshots, message logs, planning documents. Brooke Santos confirmed the physical assault. Says Blair planned it after the Title IX complaint came through. They're both willing to testify in exchange for reduced charges. Reese felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not satisfaction exactly, more like the recognition that dominoes were falling exactly as predicted, and there was no stopping the cascade now. Sarah thanked Rivera and ended the call. Then she sat down across from Reese, studying her daughter's face. How do you feel? Tired. Reese set down the tea. And kind of sad. Sad? Blair could have just left me alone. She could have taken the Title IX investigation, dealt with whatever consequences came, and moved on. Instead, she escalated until the only option left was criminal prosecution. Reese touched her swollen nose gingerly. She destroyed her own life. That's not on you. I know, but it's still sad. The preliminary hearing happened Friday morning in Millbrook District Court. Reese sat in the gallery beside her mother, watching Blair Pierce stand before Judge Harrison. The courtroom was old wood and newer fluorescent lighting. American flag hanging behind the bench, the whole machinery of justice grinding forward with procedural efficiency. Blair looked smaller somehow without her designer wardrobe and perfect hair, orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed in front, eyes red from crying. Her parents sat in the front row, both expensive suits and grim expressions. The lawyer they'd hired was known for getting rich kids out of trouble. Today he looked like he knew he was fighting uphill. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Chen, laid out the charges with devastating precision. Assault and battery, criminal harassment, conspiracy to commit cyber stalking, destruction of evidence, though the body camera had survived. Each charge came with statutory references and evidence summaries. The harassment log Reese had compiled, the witness statements, the surveillance footage showing Blair's knee driving into Reese's face with unmistakable intent. Judge Harrison reviewed the evidence packet, her face unreadable. Blair's lawyer argued for bail. Low flight risk, strong community ties, no prior record. The prosecutor countered with the severity of injuries and the calculated nature of the harassment campaign. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was weeks of escalating threats culminating in public violence. The judge made her ruling. Bail set at $50,000. Ankle monitor required. No contact order prohibiting any communication with Reese Morgan or witnesses. Court date set for preliminary examination in 2 weeks. Blair's father posted bail that afternoon. By evening, she was home under house arrest, the ankle monitor blinking on her leg like an electronic scarlet letter. The social media response was immediate and brutal. Someone had uploaded the bus stop footage to Twitter within hours of the arrest. Surveillance camera angle, clear enough to show everything. Blair's face, the assault. Reese on the ground bleeding, the timestamp proving it was recent and real. The video went viral overnight. 50,000 views became 500,000, became 2 million. Blair's carefully curated Instagram presence, her 52,000 followers, who had trusted her feminist advocacy and anti-bullying stance, turned on her with the fury of the betrayed. Reese watched the follower count drop in real time. 52,000, 43,000, 27,000. Brand partnerships announced they were severing ties. Stanford University, where Blair had applied early decision, issued a statement that applications were evaluated holistically, and criminal charges would be considered in admissions decisions. By Monday morning, Blair had 11,000 followers left. The comments on her last post, a motivational quote about girl power from 3 weeks ago, were savage. Ashford Prep Academy announced its own investigation Tuesday morning. Principal Vance, the same administrator who had told Reese to let things go, now stood before an emergency school board meeting explaining how cyberbullying and assault had flourished under his watch. The Title IX complaint Reese had filed, the one he'd dismissed as teenage drama, was now evidence of institutional negligence. Ms. Ortiz, the Title IX coordinator, presented her findings. 47 documented incidents over 2 weeks, multiple reports to administration, a clear pattern of escalating harassment, and repeated failures by Principal Vance to take action until legal liability became unavoidable. The board voted for a comprehensive policy review, mandatory anti-bullying training for all staff, anonymous reporting systems, and Ms. Ortiz was promoted to assistant principal with specific oversight of student safety. Principal Vance was placed on administrative leave pending further review. The criminal case moved forward with mechanical inevitability. Rachel and Brooke, having given full statements, were offered plea deals, accessory charges, mandatory counseling, probation. They took the deals gratefully, their testimony solidifying the case against Blair. Blair's lawyer tried everything. Motion to suppress the surveillance footage, denied. Motion to exclude the harassment log, denied. Character witnesses, testifying to Blair's good works, undermined by the video evidence that showed exactly who she was when consequences seemed distant. 2 months after the bus stop assault, Blair Pierce accepted a plea deal. 1 year probation, 200 hours, community service, mandatory anger management counseling, restitution for Reese's medical bills, and a public apology video to be posted on Blair's own social media accounts and left up permanently. The video went up on a gray February morning. Blair sat in her bedroom, face bare of makeup, eyes hollow. She read from a prepared statement about accountability and acknowledging harm. The words were legally vetted and emotionally empty. Comments were disabled, but shares weren't. Within hours, it had been downloaded and re-uploaded to dozens of reaction channels and commentary videos. Blair Pierce, influencer, had become Blair Pierce, cautionary tale. Reese returned to Ashford Prep Academy 3 weeks after the assault. Her nose had healed with only a slight bump, easily covered by makeup when she bothered. The real changes were harder to see. Students who had previously avoided her now nodded in hallways. A few approached with careful apologies for their silence. Others kept their distance. But the mockery was gone, replaced by something like respect, or maybe just wariness. Reese had proven she couldn't be pushed around, and nobody wanted to test whether that extended to retaliation. Ms. Ortiz called her into the new student safety office during second period. The space was bright and welcoming, posters about consent and reporting procedures covering the walls, a far cry from Principal Vance's intimidating oak panels. "How are you adjusting?" Ms. Ortiz asked, genuine concern in her voice. "Fine." Reese settled into the offered chair. "Weird, but fine. I wanted to thank you." Ms. Ortiz folded her hands on her desk. "Your documentation and courage exposed serious failures in how we handle harassment. The policy changes we're implementing will protect other students. That matters." Reese nodded slowly. She'd thought about this a lot during recovery. The personal victory felt good, but the systemic change felt important. Will it be enough? Probably not. Ms. Ortiz's honesty was refreshing. There will always be people who abuse power, but now we have better tools to respond. And students know reporting works. That's not nothing. A letter arrived at Reese's home in early March, heavy paper, official seal. Inside was an invitation to testify before the state legislature's education committee. They were drafting new cyberbullying legislation and wanted victim perspectives on enforcement and institutional accountability. Reese held the letter, reading it 3 times. This was bigger than Ashford Prep, bigger than Blair Pierce. This was a chance to shape laws that would protect students across the entire state. But it also meant going public. State capitol, news cameras. Her face and name attached to testimony that would live in government records forever. The harassment might start all over again, but worse, broader, anonymous. "What do you think?" Reese asked her mother over dinner that night. Sarah considered the question seriously. "I think you've already paid a high price for doing the right thing. Nobody would blame you for saying no." "That's not what I asked." "I think you already know what you're going to do." Sarah smiled slightly. "You just want permission to be scared about it." "I am scared." "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing Reese's hand. "But this time you won't be alone. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Reese thought about Blair's desperate escalation, about Rachel and Brooke following orders because speaking up seemed harder than complying, about Principal Vance looking away because addressing the problem was inconvenient, about all the students at Ashford who had watched her suffer and said nothing. She thought about Mr. Park calling 911 when everyone else just filmed, about Ms. Ortiz pushing for change despite institutional resistance, about Officer Rivera taking a 17-year-old's evidence seriously enough to build a real case. Not everyone looked away. Some people helped. And maybe by going to the legislature, Reese could help build a system where looking away became harder and helping became easier. She picked up her phone, pulled up the email address from the letter, and began typing her response. 3 months later, Reese stood in the state capitol rotunda waiting to testify. The marble floors gleamed under chandeliers. Around her, lobbyists and legislators and citizens moved with purpose through the building's arteries. Somewhere above, in Committee Room 14, a microphone waited. Her mother stood beside her, solid and steady. Ms. Ortiz had driven up that morning for support. Even Emma Zhao, whose vandalized Mercedes had started this whole cascade, had come to watch. A legislative aide called Reese's name. Time to testify. She walked toward the committee room, each step echoing. The aide held the door open. Inside, state representatives sat in a semicircle, some listening intently, others scrolling phones. The committee chair gestured to the witness table. Reese sat, adjusted the microphone, looked out at the faces that would decide whether her experience mattered enough to change laws. Then she began to speak. The testimony lasted 40 minutes. She walked the committee through the harassment, the institutional failures, the escalation to physical violence. She explained documentation strategies and why evidence preservation mattered. She answered questions about social media platforms and school policies and what would actually help vulnerable students. When she finished, the committee chair thanked her. Several representatives nodded approval. One asked for copies of her harassment log as a model template for the bill's enforcement guidelines. Reese stepped away from the microphone, legs shaky with adrenaline crash. In the gallery, her mother smiled. Real pride, the kind that had nothing to do with grades or achievements and everything to do with character. Outside the Capitol, news crews waited. Reese gave 3 interviews, keeping her answers focused and professional. By evening, her testimony was trending on social media. Not viral like Blair's assault video, but steady. People sharing her story with comments about their own harassment experiences, about institutions that failed them, about fighting back when silence seemed easier. Her phone buzzed. A message request from a username she didn't recognize. Phoenix Rising 2025. Reese stared at the notification, finger hovering between accept and decline. The username could be anyone. A supporter, a journalist, Blair trying to circumvent the no-contact order, another bully looking for a new target. But it could also be someone who needed to know that speaking up was possible, that documentation worked, that the system could be made to care if you understood how to force it. She thought about who she'd been 4 months ago, quiet, careful, trying to disappear, and who she was now, visible, vocal, unafraid to take up space because she'd learned the most dangerous thing wasn't being seen. It was being silenced. Reese accepted the message request. Whatever came next, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else, with evidence, with procedure, with the unshakable certainty that justice wasn't something you waited for. It was something you built, case by case, documented incident by documented incident, until the weight of proof became too heavy to ignore. They had thought kneeing her in the face would silence her. Instead, it had given her a microphone, and Reese Morgan had discovered she had quite a lot to say.
And that wraps up today's video. Thanks so much for spending a little time with me on Fearless Grace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell because the next video is already on its way.